Every week we end the program with a quick recommendation, something you could be listening to, watching, or reading. It's called The Outshot. Now, I didn't expect to get reeled in, or maybe yanked in is more like it, to The Young Pope, the HBO limited series that just ended its inaugural run. But there I was, binge-watching sometimes, just topping up my tank with a quick one-hour meal at other times. Now, if you think you're going to watch, if you're going to watch the whole series, let me tell you, there are some spoilers ahead. For those of you who stayed well away or didn't even know it was on, here's the quick need to know. The young pope is Jude Law, an American, Lenny Belardo, elected to the papacy at a time very much like our time. Like the title says, he's young. He's really handsome because he's Jude Law. But instead of doing the modern papal thing and jetting around the world and becoming a global sensation, Pope Pius XIII instead withdraws to the tiny city-state of the Vatican, doesn't take selfies, doesn't hug children and old ladies, or preach loving reassurance from the throne of St. Peter in a New York accent. Nope. Pope Pius turns his back on what all kinds of religious figures have been doing for decades, trying to become more knowable, more relatable, more immersed in the world. He instead ratchets up an aspect of religion we haven't talked a lot about lately: mystery.
I was late because I couldn't find your office.
I know, you opened the wrong door and found yourself face to face with some visitors to our museum.
Oh, you've been inquiring about me, too.
It's very difficult to keep anything secret here in the Vatican. Rumors fly so quickly that sometimes they arrive even before the event has taken place.
It's quite a useful piece of information for my future.
Which is exactly what it was intended to be, Holy Father.
Oh, what is one to do, Monsignor? It's the times. In America, we call it gossip.
Here in the Vatican, we call it calumny.
Over the course of the 10 episodes, we're introduced to Lenny's backstory, his abandonment by hippie parents at an orphanage run by Sister Mary, now an aging Diane Keaton, who is as devoted to the young pope as she was to Lenny, her young orphan. Across the 10 episodes, the sumptuous, gorgeously composed, beautifully imagined work of director Paolo Sorrentino rests on three main pillars: the jangling incongruity of a young, handsome pope who leads the church stomping back into very old ideas about authority, submission, and obedience; the world of the Vatican, even in the modern church, a place of intrigue, backstabbing, score-settling, and constantly shifting alliances; and the young pope's relationship with his crafty Secretary of State, Cardinal Voiello; and the backstory of a broken-hearted, middle-aged man who now is one of the most famous and influential beings on the planet, who still lives with the pain of a complicated and unresolved childhood. If it sounds like 10 pounds of stuff for a 5-pound bag, well, yeah, it's packed, and visually arresting, and well-acted, and veering between stilted dialogue and just plain old brilliant writing. In the final episode of the series, Pope Pius XIII sits in a chapel with his one-time mentor, an American cardinal, Michael Spencer, played by James Cromwell, who thought he was going to be the pope and is still pretty bitter about it. But he's also worried about the future of the church under an ultra-conservative pope who's young enough to be in the chair for decades. The two men argue about the pope's recent ruling that there would be no forgiveness, no absolution for women who get an abortion, and their conversation was full of religious history, legalism, and riveting confrontation.
God isn't for you, Lenny. God is for men who have no use for freedom. You're wrong about abortion. You're spreading a sorrow you don't even understand. And that's the worst thing a human being can do. You've made the kind of mistake that should have been avoided at all cost. Introducing concepts that taken by themselves are true, but which when lumped together constitute a system that's overly rigid.
When it comes to abortion, rigidity is the only option. There's no getting around it. It's a crime. Forbidden and punished in the book of Exodus, chapter 21, verses 22 to 25. You know that.
In that same episode, Pope Pius heads to Venice at Christmas time. In a sudden about-face, decides to celebrate Mass in front of the world-famous St. Mark's Basilica, with the main square of the watery city packed with the faithful, who've had few opportunities to see this pope. And after months of stern, uncompromising, even angry scolding, Lenny Belardo opens his arms to the world.
God does not allow himself to be seen. God does not shout. God does not whisper. God does not write. God does not hear. God does not chat. God does not comfort us. And all the children asked her, "Who is God?" And Juana replied, "God smiles." And only then did everyone understand.
Then, this complicated, rigid arch-conservative with a broken heart grabs his chest and falls backwards. He thinks he may have seen his now elderly parents among the congregants in St. Mark's Square. He's in pain, but he's not dead, which leaves open the possibility of a lot more young Pope. That's my